Hi there, my name is Alexander Corey Toru, and I will be reviewing Chapter 9, which is about learning through avoidances, as well as how to avoid any kind of shock. The chapter goes back to talking about rats, who basically use the phrase, and we're not talking about the talking rats, we're just talking about regular lab rats, of the phrase, press the lever or else. And that leads us to see that we do an astonishing amount of avoiding. Much of the time we are not even aware that we are motivated by avoidance. So for instance, we have students who try to avoid getting Fs. We go under the radar at work to not get fired, and many children behave properly at home to not be verbally or physically abused. We also have churches threatening our lives with hellfire. There is also the law that keeps us in check. If avoidance is not possible, escape is the rule, and of the two, avoidance predominates most of the world and has few alternatives. And, coincidentally, we do a lot of threatening as well. My little note here says, ironically, we do the shock. I know, brilliant note. And so we use phrases as do what I tell you, do it the way I say, do it my way, toe the line. So if you're a teacher, if you work with students, I'm sure you've used some of these phrases before. Our first section that we come across, purple section, is what else goes along with avoidance. That would be a little subpart that says, keep your nose out of trouble. So the first example in the text refers to a monkey spending its time multitasking between pressing the lever and grooming itself. Now this is under extreme circumstances in a laboratory, but to see this in real life can be a true detriment for learning. People can learn through avoidance contingencies. What they learn, however, is to avoid and little else. With an actual environment provides only when resources continuously threaten harsh depletion or withdrawal of these resources, life becomes nearly restricted. So it's not great. It's really not a way to live life. Another way is don't rock the boat. Individuals living the life of avoidance become negative and inflexible. Rules were not made to be broken. And this is where we learn to live the straight and narrow path. As this is also the reason why I know it's safer to say no than yes. Our next section is kill them all, and that refers to terrorists and how life is, to some, very grandiose, modern transportation, unbound luxury, right within our arm's reach, and a good portion of us cannot have these things. Our life doesn't permit it, our jobs don't permit it, it's just not a thing. And that makes people, unfortunately, jealous. And it's also the reason why we can't negotiate with terrorists, because it's their one option, and without it there is no hope, no way to extort some share of the world's resources. They want to extort the world's resources for themselves and to make others suffer as well. Our next section begins with slow learning, and we jump straight into wait until it hurts. And there are endless examples of this type of circumstances where we don't go to the doctor until we're terribly sick. We know the dangers of high cholesterol, however, we continue to eat what we want. We follow the rules of avoidance and don't worry about it until it actually happens. And a final example would be that a child doesn't need to be burned in order to learn from their parents not come into contact with the stove. But a small portion of us really need to go see and experience such harshness. And this is also kind of my way of teaching too. I try to prevent my children from doing my students from doing something. However, 99.9% of the time, they want to do it themselves, and then they want to tell me, Miss Alex, I hurt myself. Miss Alex, I did this. I'm sorry. And I'll just be like, alright, well, I told you not to do it. You're either going to learn and then never do it again, or you're just going to listen to me. So they try to take the highway on this portion. The next section is about nuclear destruction, and is it avoidable? Question mark. This section pretty much talks about how weapons are powerful and how countries feel the need to have this sort of power in order to threaten and potentially shock a society. Obviously, we do know about nuclear warfare because of what happened in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. However, no one really wants to end life, so it's just kind of an open-ended threatening tool. And then, of course, we've all said this before, it couldn't happen to me. We are always being told to set money aside, have assurances just in case something happens. Well, not really. We say we're doing such things, and then an instance happens, and then you're depleted of your resources, or you've lost your job, your car, whatever it might be. But you still come out saying, or before any instances, you say it couldn't happen to me. Our next main section is superstitions. This section begins by saying that if we try to teach a setting of avoidance contingencies, they can bring about other troubles or outcomes. So the reading refers back to the laboratory and focuses on avoidance, and the questions to be asked are exactly, what does it take to keep the shock from coming? Do I actually have to press the lever, or is it enough just to come near it? In reference to the book, the monkey will just sit and press the lever, but it will do other things. And in the world, and just keep on doing its routine. However, because the shock is unknown and the punishment is delayed, this often can make trouble and create behavioral baggage. Behavioral baggage is referred in the instance to this lab monkey. Maybe it was running around the lab 5 times. This is just my own example. This is not from the actual readings. And so the monkey just runs around, does something once different, and then gets a shock because it pushed the lever or it missed the lever. Then it has this behavioral baggage of like, oh my gosh, I'm never going to play with that freaking apple, monkey, banana again, because now I see it as a bad thing. It's made me get a shock. So we're just going to put it off to the side. And let me just get back to my notes. I apologize. Okay, so the next section here, I'm sorry, as you've all been waiting, is the avoiding the unavoidable, as we refer to as avoidance paradox. If we avoid successfully, that shocks never come anymore. Avoidance inevitably weakens, and we must again experience the shock before the avoidance will be reinstated. Again, the avoidance paradox reveals a critical difference between positive and negative reinforcement. So, for instance, if the only reason a study is to keep from feeling, if a student studies, is to keep from feeling an occasional failure or near failure, will be necessary to keep the student going. And, of course, once learning avoidance is inherently cyclical. And that's kind of a bummer. And then, in this chapter, which I thought was an interesting reference, was going back to Nazi concentration camps, and how they would select few victims arbitrarily for a distraction. They would add add at unpredictable times. This was to make sure that the avoidance is there, and that was happening, and that the lack of shocks would still shock people and keep them in line. And this is kind of a hostile way to think about it, and many people wondered, as the book brought up, why the Jews never fought back. And as I highlighted here, their deaths served to maintain the docility of those who remained. And it was the docility that unfortunately kept many alive, but many had to sacrifice themselves for the greater good. Our last section here is avoidance, escape from avoidance. And this section refers to severe punishment and how escape automatically becomes reinforced. We've seen instances in movies, and I'm sure this happens in real life, where prisoners are just at their wits' end, and there's no more sanity, and they just need to escape, and leaving their cell or going outside is just not an option anymore, and they have to find the ultimate escape as the only option. We've also seen this in mental institutions when the staff hurts the clients, and the client, for whatever reason, can't communicate, can't say what they need, so they know best to get out of the situation, and unfortunately it's not the greatest response. I don't know if this is such a great question. These questions are becoming harder for me to think about, but referring back to the portion of where verbal warnings are effective or not, I'm sure there are countless examples where you've been verbally warned and you'd like it to be fine, but do you think verbal warnings should be a thing? Should we learn our consequences through action, or should we learn them through warnings? What do you think would have made... Nope, that's it. I was going to go on to a whole nother question of what do you think would have made society better. You can totally still answer it, but this was a very long chapter. I'm sorry for keeping you for this long. But I guess to restate my question again, do you think it would be better to have learned their consequences through actions, or just mainly through words? Thanks.